for a reason. And so we started. My name is Trisha. I use she, her pronouns. A little bit about me. Again, Trisha. Do not call me Tricia. I'm smiling while I say this, but Trisha. And this is a picture of my little brother. Yes, he's half white. I'm not. We have a multicultural family, like a brochure. But this is my little brother, Sebastian. He's 7 years old. He is the light of my life. I cut the cord with him when he was born. He is my everything. Of course, I call home Wichita, Kansas, which is a 19-hour drive. I have only made the trek back home since I moved here one time because of this topic. I really only visit because of Sebastian. I have a 14-year-old sister who's there. I didn't want to put a picture. I didn't get prior approval because she's 14. She's like, I need to see everything, whatever. She's a teenager. And I also have a beautiful Nana, a grandfather, and a great-grandmother who also really have travel restrictions. So I only go home because I have to see them. So these are my beautiful folks and the light of my life. Briefly before I kind of get into the topic, what this is and what it's not, this is more something for folks who are dealing with toxic families. It's a collection of suggestions. It's not a clinical diagnosis. It's not pathologizing. I'm not a clinician, but I've just pulled together different resources that have helped me. And they will be also helpful to you all as you navigate the holiday season and going back home. So I chose this topic, one, because of my own life. Home has not always been a safe place. I'm very open about being a survivor of childhood sexual assault, and that was happened in my home, which really dictates how you grow up and a complicated view of what home even means. I was someone fortunate enough to feel peace within my room, but once I left that space, as I got older, I was exposed to more toxicity. So we really can't pretend that people's home lives are as great as we like to pretend. We can't assume that on Parents Weekend, every parents are coming back to support folks. If they are, it may not be a welcome visit. And a big piece of that, abusers hurt people that they have access to. So most likely someone who is an abuser of other folks or strangers is most likely hurting their own family. And you all just got back from Thanksgiving break, and perhaps you thought that it would be great, and then you got there and it's like, why did I expect something different? And so this is more to help if you were let down by familial expectations and now you're a little nervous about how to go back on this longer winter break. My goal is to kind of give some strategies and kind of help validate the emotions that you had and be a support resource for you all. I wanted to also put a very specific line about who this is targeted for and who it's for. So this presentation really is designed, and it centers the folks who know that home is toxic and a sign of trauma. Of course, anyone can use the strategies, anyone can use help, but the people that I wrote this for are like I consider my trauma siblings. The people who know that when they go back, it's not going to be safe. And of course, if this is not your life, then that's wonderful. And then there's a little slide about how to support these folks. But again, this is made for people in mind who are combating this trauma. And again, anyone can utilize the tips, but I wanted to mention that this is for you all. So I know that quite often a lot of groups will put kind of like a blanket trigger warning, and it's sometimes not helpful. It's just like, hey, you might be triggered, and then bye. And then they move on. So I actually wanted to put together a little bit of strategies for while we're talking about this discussion today on how to ground yourself, or if you feel like you can't leave the room, or if you feel like what's looking at you, what are some things that you can do to stay whole and remember that you are not in that side of trauma. So number one, you are safe right now in this bubble. In this room, in these confines, you're here. Most likely your family is not present, and you can be protected in this bubble. Your family also that you may be thinking about when referencing this isn't in the room, and they don't know that you're here. They don't, even if they have your location on their phone, because abusers do that, they don't know that the brown bag today is about this. So if it's causing you some nervousness, know that you're okay in this space. You don't have to be here also if you don't want to. I didn't have access to my email, but I'm willing to send slides to anyone that would just like to leave the space. And I'm also making a zine about it. It was in process, and I left my sketchbook at home because that's just how life is. But the information will be shared electronically as well. So at any point, like you do not require to be in the space. These tips and strategies also can be found online. Your only obligation is to yourself. So again, you should not violate your own boundaries, respect your own boundaries. You don't owe me anything, Odette, anyone. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to be here, no questions asked. And then finally, you're not alone, because we know statistically how many folks come from dysfunctional families or toxic families. So there are multiple people that will benefit from this, and you're not the only person who has a fucked up home situation. So I wanted to put a couple slides in here about understanding, or how do I really know that my family is toxic? I think it's really difficult, especially as you grow up. You're like, you think that what you see is your baseline. It's your version of normal, but is it actually normal? Are other folks actually dealing with this? So the preface number one is that it's not wrong to call things what they are. And it's really emotionally exhausting to sit in a chair and be like, oh my God, that's been my life. It is exhausting. And the other piece too, though, that there's a name for it. That there are people who work around this. There are entire folks who devote their careers about helping folks heal from trauma. So again, you're not alone, and you shouldn't feel guilty if you feel that once you can kind of see some of the examples of abuser behavior, that it relates to your own life. I hope that you all will actually feel validated in the emotions that you have around this area. So I wanted to put a couple questions for the self. As you're thinking about if your family even is toxic. You may have a feeling like, what is a toxic family? Or I don't know, this person hurts my feeling, but am I valid in calling that toxic? I know that there are other folks who may have physically abusive families, and it's easy to call that toxic. What about someone who never hits me? What about someone who just says things, or who still provides for me, but it also it makes me feel guilty for it? So question number one, does it feel guilty to sit in this brown bag? I found it for myself, and I use myself as a reference, or speaking from my own experiences. When I researched or found things around this subject, I started to feel guilty that I was even doing so, that I was betraying my family. Does it feel like betrayal? Despite your valid feelings, despite what you have lived through, despite what you have known, despite the memories that may be popping back into your head during this, what are those feelings that are there? And then what is this kind of arbitrary familial obligation that's also like this bubble in your brain? What feelings arise when you think about going back home for winter break? What feelings arose this past break? For anyone who I have learned that folks who have been through familial trauma, you learn to put yourself behind others. So where did you learn that? If you are someone who puts others before you, how is that behavior rewarded? Who rewarded that behavior? Who taught you that it was okay to put yourself on the back burner? Do you get chronic headaches or don't feel well when you're around your family? And then all of a sudden you're away from them, you're like, wow, my stomach doesn't hurt anymore. Or I don't have a headache right here or across my entire body. How do you physically feel when you are around these people, or even talking about the people that you we call family? And do you feel comfortable even calling them family? Are they people that you're just related to? Are they people that you share blood with? What does that word family mean to you, and what informed that definition? I put in something that I didn't know about, a term called toxic stress. I'm just going to read the quote for those who may not be able to see. But it's by an author or an article from 2013, and it talks about this term called toxic stress, which is different from regular stress, different from good stress. It's its own category. But toxic stress results in prolonged activation of the stress response with the failure of the body to recover fully. It differs from normal stress response in that there is a lack of caregiver support, reassurance, or emotional attachments. The insufficient caretaker support prevents the buffering of the response or the return of the body to baseline function. And so when I read this quote, I'm like, ooh, that hurts. I feel attacked. Because you think about, again, when you grow up in a space that punishes you for being a child, that punishes you for having questions, for having needs, for throwing tantrums, there's a lot of research that it's children who go through these experiences do not first question their parents. They question themselves. And when we look at the long-term health effects of being exposed to toxic stress, heart conditions, fluctuations, or like not being able to control your weight, your body responses, headaches, high blood pressure. There's a lot of health conditions or serious health conditions that arise from being exposed to this very specific toxic stress. So I hope that this provides some validity that you may want to just call it stress or minimize it, but that toxic label is so important because it means it's not healthy for you and it's damaging, and it also alters the way that your body grows. I think about for my own self and the abuse that I survived, I feel like for a long time, didn't even know how to be a human. I don't even know how to take care of myself. I don't even know some of the baseline things because I've had to learn all these other adjustments. I feel so developed in one area and so underdeveloped in another area. And it's really that exposure of toxic stress is a cause for that. I put some questions to think about if you're trying to decide if your family is toxic and thinking about your own behaviors. One on the left are some childhood coping mechanisms. There's been like a theme in my life and in therapy that I'm in that's great, is that this idea of what got you to once survive, is it helping you live or helping you thrive? And you think about what children create responses based on what they have at the moment. So a childhood response, you may have developed this line. Perhaps your parents or whoever was took care of you constantly berated you with questions or invasive things, and you just lied to cope. We all know that yes, lying can be bad, but if you're a child in the situation, if the truth is going to get you hit or hurt, you may lie. And now you may cope or deal with that lie. You may not know how to stop lying because it's something that taught you how to survive. It's not helping you now as a 20-year-old student, but you know or you validate that this is something that I needed to do to live. The next one is frequent apologizing. I think this one is a lot more common that we see from other folks, but saying I'm sorry for things that you should not be sorry for. I have to use the bathroom, I'm sorry. We should not be sorry because we have a bladder. We should not be sorry for things that we need. So frequent apologizing over and over about things because we have this guilt feeling of I am so guilty for being a human because someone has conditioned me or taught me that it's wrong to have needs. People pleasing, again, as it gets more complex. And I forgot to put a picture in here, but some of these behaviors are constantly rewarded, especially through capitalism in the workplace. I think people pleasing is something that's constantly rewarded. You learn how to listen to another person. What do they want? How do I put who I am on pause and then accept what you want me to be and respond to that person and be that person so that you don't hurt me or that you can be my friend or that I can learn to trust you. A very valid response may have helped you survive, but will not help you live long term. It may feel like you're actually doing self-betrayal. And then they're going to do a slide about self-betrayal conditioning because I was like, whoa, when I saw it. Instagram is incredible. There's all these great counselors putting shit out there for free. And I'm like, yeah, saved for that. Coping today. Thinking about when you go home. Do you increase your substances use? I am not someone who shames folks for how they have to heal. If you are someone who has some wine or some drinks to cool down, or if you smoke, are you smoking more when you go home? Are you now using this thing that you once used to relax, using it to escape? Excessive spending. Is there anyone here who's a chronic spender or believes in retail therapy? That's me. It's okay. I know some of y'all listen to Cyber Monday deals. I already know. So when that Coke gets off the packages, I'm going to know that some of y'all were purchasing things. I am someone who believes in the power of retail therapy. It can be damaging, though. It's like, why am I buying pots and pans when I got bills to pay? Or I have textbooks or certain things. If you think about that, whether that dopamine response of like, yes, I now purchased this thing and I now have this sweater in the mail and I feel better. Like that feeling better in that cute ass sweater does not heal trauma. It feels good for a hot second. I will validate that because listen, I feel like half the clothes I'm wearing were like trauma purchases. So I'm still benefiting from it. But there's something that you're ignoring. Are you using these coping things to ignore very real, concrete things in your life that you need to work, that you are now put in the position that you have to work on? Poor sleep habits, sleeping excessively or not being able to sleep at all. Poor sexual health. Are you someone who typically makes sure that you are using contraception, that you are communicating with partners? How does that change when you go home? I find quite often that these coping mechanisms can also be just recklessness. I don't care about myself because other folks, don't care about me, so why should I care? Why should I do this thing? I'm not using contraception. I don't have my plan B. I'm not using my birth control. I'm not using my STI prevention because I really don't care. So what are the root causes of those behaviors? And how do we kind of put a halt to it? How do we stop it? How do you not guilt yourself for having it, but say, you know what? I need to check in with myself. I'm going to allow myself to know that at the core of this feeling, there's some pain and this hurt. But now because I love myself, I'm going to alter my behavior. Because I love myself, I'm going to recognize that this is an unhealthy trait for me. So this is some of a couple pictures. I'm going to go through these two from someone called the Holistic Psychologist. I love this bitch on Instagram. Her stuff is great. I'm going to put some quotes that I use on towards the end. But if we look at the graphic on the left, is self-betrayal conditioning. And I was like, whoa, what is this? So part of how you can betray yourself. This can happen one in the top left corner, reality denial. So when an adult denies something that we repeatedly see as a child, that person is drinking, an event that took place, something that child knew. Also gaslighting. And you didn't see that. That denying, because again, the power dynamics between the adult and the child, you are now, the response is not that my parent is wrong, but there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with my framework. And I know I keep using the word framework, but there's something wrong with me. To the right, emotional dismissing. An adult denies emotional experience that the child needs help processing. The adult may tell the child to just be grateful. It wasn't that bad, or this says nothing at all. This is infuriating in your own lives as adults. So thinking about the effect this has as a child who is developing skills or developing a framework on how to learn or how to judge people. So again, this dismissing, allowing yourself to dismiss your very valid feelings, not being able to name those feelings. Betrayal witnessing. Child sees adult betraying themselves to receive love or meet needs. Example, a parent remains in an abusive relationship, a lack of boundaries, or a lack of communicating needs. I want to be very clear on this piece that this is all so complex. And every time we try to oversimplify something, we're missing the very critical pieces. A parent who may stay in an abusive relationship may do so out of safety reasons. An abuser, we find that if you look at when people are trying to escape these relationships, that's when they are killed. So this is not to blame or to guilt a parent who has had to stay in this relationship, and at the same time, there are still damaging effects to the children because of that. It's not the parent who is suffering's fault, it's just a fault of the circumstance. So this is not to place blame on parents who have not been able to escape. And then finally, self-neglect. Child sees adults abandon their physical, mental, and spiritual wellness. So the adults do not practice self-care. The adults are impulsive, they lack self-awareness, and they lack emotional regulation. These are things that I have seen in my own life. I get my retail therapy from my mom, or my big retail therapy that some folks who know me may be my school supplies or pens. I'm like, I'm depressed. Pilot 12-pack, let's go. And at one point, I thought that behavior was okay or healthy because I saw it. So now that I'm 24, it's like, okay, now how do I change that? But I was groomed to think a certain way. And that response has an effect. On the right, there is a graphic about signs of healing a wounded inner child. And if there's anyone who has in a toxic family, I really would invite you to research what inner child wounds are and what that means in your own life. For myself, I think for me, in my own interpretation and how I'm working for myself, I think about who is the version of myself, the tiny little 6-7-year-old version of me that was harmed. I think about the part of me when I was first sexually assaulted. I feel like that was that Tracia within me. Sometimes she calls the shots. I feel myself still reacting like her. I feel her responding or being angry or certain pieces. And now that I've gotten older, I'm like, whoa, there's an inner child. And that inner child that I have in me has had some wounds. So some signs that you may have a wounded inner child. Number 1, adult fantasy beliefs. Believing that someone will come fix, save, or rescue me from my current reality. Sounds like something that a parent would do. A belief that things will change without me or do anything to change myself. Only a guru, therapist, celebrity has the answers that I need. I think this piece is so important. And this Dr. Lepera also put this really important, incredible graphic on her Insta about not outsourcing your power, because a therapist and a counselor or a guidance person is someone who's going to help facilitate empowerment with you and help you make sense, but you're always in control. Always. And it's very difficult, I think, when you are in these situations that you have this child wound, that you see an adult that seemingly has all the answers, like, yes, teach me how to do my life, teach me this and that. But even folks who don't have healthy, or people who do have healthy families, like, you eventually grow up. And so what are the ways that you're finding that you're actually not growing up, or you're trying to find answers or parenting in another way? Can you use counseling in your mind? Do you think it's being a parent? Believing that you have no control or free will over your life. believing that people are out to hurt you intentionally or harm you. And then finally, I think this is another piece that is often rewarded in our society, that marriage or a career or an accomplishment will fix those deep inner wounds. This is something that I myself have felt victim to, especially as a college student. I was going through a process of getting my CV and things together, and I was looking at years of being so involved in student government and activities and protesting and organizing, all of these different things, and looking at awards and scholarships. And then I look at my transcript from that same period of time. And then I'm like, ooh. And then it's like, how was I using certain external validation markers or certain external things to make myself feel better while I was ignoring the ways that I was spinning out of control? For me personally, it was my classes. And I think that's something that happens with a lot of folks. I'm failing my class. Let me show that I can prove that I can be a psych intern or prove that I can do research. When you have this very necessary benchmark, a GP that you have to have to get into grad school or can do on your other goals. So what are the ways that capitalism may reward certain behaviors that we are also using as escape routes from the very real pain that we have? I wanted to add in here some behaviors to look for from families. I think the first two are really together: control and blame, and their cousins' guilt and shame. When you think about a control situation, someone, I want to make decisions for you, and then that blame, I blame you when that decision does not give me the reaction that I wanted. It's still not rooted in your own needs. It's this person trying to control your actions and then blaming you when that action doesn't produce a result. And then as a reaction of that action becomes guilt and shame. And I love saying release gas, guilt and shame, GAS, get rid of it. And that guilt and shame can be so unproductive. Guilt is really only productive for a second because you can torture yourself emotionally, but if you're not actually repairing harm through your actions, what's the point of you feeling guilty? So now you may feel guilt because you either did not let that person control you or the response harmed you. You may feel ashamed of the responses or who you are. I think about the way that I have lashed out at someone because of a response or because of something that had triggered me. I felt deep shame by it. And again, how can guilt and shame be ways that you are torturing yourself, continuing that self-betrayal? Dismissal of your feelings or invalidating. If you're in a situation of a toxic family, you may not ever feel like you're allowed to be human. You may feel like you're never allowed to have space or allowed to have valid emotions, or you're only allowed to have positive emotions, even though humans have a full spectrum. There's anger, frustration, sadness. These are all necessary and important emotions. I worked with kids before this job, and what I did was work in social emotional intelligence, and we had some language, evidence-based language, that with kids we would teach them that no emotion is bad. All emotions are valid. All emotions teach us certain things. Sadness teaches us that we had lost and had pride at one point, or that we loved something. Anger ignites our sense of betrayal or our sense of justice. These emotions all teach us things. So we told our kids all feelings are okay. All behaviors are not, but all feelings are okay because there's a stimuli. No emotion is invalid. Putting their feelings on a platform or over validation. Sometimes people may use the language of this person is playing the victim. I don't like that language because I have a complicated relationship with the word victim anyway. And there's all the different pieces. So I think about when someone, they underplay your emotions, they overplay their own emotions. They overtalk about it, they overdo it because they're trying to get attention and seek from that. I think about constant critics. A family member who seems to never be satisfied. A grandparent who, no matter what you tell them you accomplished at school, you got this new scholarship, you got an award, you got in society, it is never enough. They are never satisfied. They are never pleased. Every behavior gets a response. It's criticized or it's over-exaggerated. In putting this, I had an example of my own life. So in my institution, my school at university, we had multiple colleges. At one point, when I was colonized, I was a business major. No jab at you business majors, but for myself, how I believed I was not a healthy business major. Y'all can be healthy, but I wasn't. I was a business and psychology major. At my institution, when you graduate one college double major, you have 2 graduations, which is extra as hell. So eventually, when I realized that I was a terrible person while I was a business major, I was like, drop that, and I added women's studies, and I became this, who I am today. But I remember that I was at a restaurant called Cheddar's, my favorite restaurant. Like, y'all don't know what you're missing out. There, anyway, I was at Cheddar's with my mom and my siblings. My mom is a toxic person that I reference quite often, and I was telling her, you know what, yeah, I dropped my business major. I added women's studies. I'm really happy. At the time, I was also, again, if you saw my bio, I have 2 degrees, a minor, and 2 certificates. 5 things, while it takes most folks 4 years to get 1 thing, and that's okay. I was just doing the most. And she responded like, "You're not gonna have 2 graduations?" And I was like, "No, I still have 2 whole ass degrees." But that moment and that the way that she reacted, I had felt so much shame about it. And then I'm like, wait a second. First of all, you're not paying for this degree. Second of all, like again, this is a really big accomplishment. To be able to even access a college degree is such a privilege and it's so powerful. And so the fact that I'm achieving this thing, I'm actually still overachieving, and even in my overachievement, it's not enough. That moment was able to help me realize that I was had a toxic family member in my own life, and it was my mother. This person, they never praise you when you get it right. You mention an accomplishment, it's like, whatever, it comes to the side. But as soon as you get something wrong, it's on the spotlight. You think like that. If you have iPhone, you go to that little like spotlight text messages, like boom. That's how they treat your mistakes. And many times, the piece that it's really all a projection. They're taking it out on you. And when you have a family member, especially someone who is older, you may start to internalize that projection. They have this person has authority in your life, and you may just say, well, you know what, something may be wrong with me, even though something wrong with them. Threats. The thing about a threat that's so important is that even if a threat is not followed through, that psychological torment is valid and it is real. So if someone doesn't always have to enact a punishment for it to be toxic, and then just the act of it can be toxic. Saying I won't pay for your education anymore because of this, and that. I'm not going to pay for your food. You're not going to have this and that. The threat of that because you think about when you have someone threatens you, that worry, that loss of power, that loss of control, all of those emotions that are coming up that are valid, and that is an abuser tactic. I put some pieces in here too, because even though I mentioned quite often in my own experience has been with parents or older family members, siblings can also be toxic, and parents can even fuel that toxic sibling relationship. Is there preferential treatment? Is it extreme preferential treatment? Is one sibling getting their basic needs met and another isn't? Is one sibling being criticized and the other isn't? Or this idea of extreme rivalries or sibling rivalries. Are siblings constantly being pit together? How is one sibling responding to that? I'm sure the sibling who is put on a platform may internalize it. So now how is that person being an asshat? Because your parents are an asshat, and it's just like, I have nowhere to go. So these are some of the behaviors that I think we can look at and kind of put some terms next to it and validate that that's actually something real, and that's a toxic behavior. And even if a person isn't holistically toxic, they may have other great traits that they usually do. That toxic behavior still needs to be addressed. And even if you're an incredible person, it does not excuse the harm that you're causing. So I wanted to put some general tips and strategies for you all. And I should have mentioned that feel free to take pictures of any of this, but I also can send slides to anyone who would like them. I wanted to put a note that accepting the circumstance is not tantamount to accepting the trauma. You can accept that a situation is trash without wanting it to be trash. But what that helps you realize is that you have to set reasonable expectations, and that you need to work from those. Having realistic and reasonable expectations is absolutely necessary. I think about quite often I hear these terms from my own life when I've had friends who are incredible people who were then dating trash folks. They're like, he has potential. I'm like, this is not the time to date someone or to love someone based on potential. And I see y'all side-eyeing your friends. I did not mean to start a fight. But again, this is not the time to treat someone based on potential, but rather their past behavior and how they have treated you. Preparing for that war just means that you have your tools ready. So a couple different strategies. Number one, emotional processing, talking to yourself or to your spirit. I love journaling. I know folks may roll their eyes at the concept of journaling, but you have to make journaling work for you. I think journaling is like poetry. There is a poem out there for everyone. You just have to find it and what works for you. So for me, I use a traditional notebook. It's like black. I'm like in Barnes and Noble, right? Like that's my thing. But that may not be your thing. You may be someone who likes to type or to text. So what about the Notes app on your phone? You can make different folders on your Notes app. You can make a secret email for that folder of your Notes app. How can you, if you're already on your phone, how can you turn that into journaling really quickly? Private Twitter. I love private social media. I have a private Twitter where me and my friends talk shit and send news, and it's great. And the beautiful piece about that is that, again, this is my space. I'm a hot mess. But I have, you can have a private Twitter that you have no followers on. You may just want to tweet it. You may want to restrict your response to 280 characters. That's fine. It's up to you. But being able to put it out there, to put it as an outlet, what works for you? Folks who have Finstas. If you don't know what a Finsta is, it's like a private Twitter or a private or a fake Instagram. How can you use a Finsta to process things? Take pictures of the bullshit. Like, look at this person make this stupid ass cake, and you want to rant about that. Well, however you want to. Use these different platforms that are free and accessible to you that you may be using in other ways for your healing. Voice or video recordings. Do you want to have a chat with yourself? Do you need to see yourself talking to yourself or hearing or cataloging these things? Or archiving helpful pictures. That Instagram save feature, I have like multiple folders. I have a self-justice folder, a grow-up folder, all these different pieces. So make things work for you. I know that there's a lot of talk about social media and toxicity. All that aside, you can make things work for you, and it doesn't matter to anyone else but to you. Gray rocking. This is a term that I learned about a year ago. And so I'm going to read, there's two quotes on these slides, but the first one is that gray rock is primarily a way of encouraging a psychopath, a stalker, or emotionally unbalanced person to lose interest in you. So it differs from no contact or cutting this person off. Because you don't overtly try to avoid contact. So again, this is helpful if there is someone that if you have to go home and have to see the person who you don't want to see, you can't just cut. It may be difficult to cut that person off. So gray rocking is a really great technique for that. It's a practice where an individual becomes emotionally non-responsive, boring, virtually acts like a rock. So that's where the term comes from. And that emotional detachment serves as a way to undermine, in this case, a narcissist or whoever in place, their attempts to lure and manipulate, causing them to grow uninterested and bored in you. The gray rock method takes away what that person needs the most, which is attention. So for someone, a gray rock technique may be, Odette, how was school? And then she's like, fine. How's that relationship? Over. What are you doing? Nothing. And it may seem a little awkward, but over time, it's a way of controlling the narrative. It's a way of controlling that response. It's, I am not giving you what you want. You are not going to make me give you what you want, which is information or anything to prod, or however. It's a way of, again, acting like a rock. It is unresponsive, and then that person eventually loses interest. This can happen with, you can use this technique with anyone in your life. The next is structured low contact. If you look inside this box, this is actually the username of the Reddit user who created kind of this list of structured low contact. So of course, we all would love to cut toxic people out of our lives, but if that toxic person paying for your tuition, can't really cut them out of your life. So how do you structure some low contact with this person, and what are some strategies that you can do to do so? So number one, a helpful tip is not spending alone time with that person. Having someone else there that may be helpful, a sibling or a friend or a grandparent or someone else in the room, and not allowing yourself to be alone, or not being found in a situation where you're alone with this person who knows that they are a trash human being. No long phone calls or conversations with this person. And even a timer. Maybe allow you to say, you know what, I'm not going to spend more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes with this person. Talking with my Nana about a toxic person the other day, she said, I can't talk to this person any longer than 10 minutes. Because at that 10-minute mark, they get comfortable and then start being annoying. They start doing that toxic behavior. So now that you know this, how can you adjust your behavior to do that? And it's not fair. You should not have to do this. And I'm so sorry that you do. But if you have to, I'm hoping that these can be tips and strategies to help you feel like you have some type of armor that when you go back home, you're like, I feel more prepared than I was over Thanksgiving break. Making yourself a moving target if you can. So being able to leave the house frequently. Being able to go out constantly. This person can't find you at home. So you're back in your hometown, but you're never really in the space where that person has access to you if you're able to do that. Which that does take gas money, Uber money, bus money, etc. Or think if you have other folks that can give you a ride or a taxi cab, whatever you can do to get physically out of that situation. Knowing that person's entry points. What are that person's things they like to harp on that they know it makes you feel bad? And for some, it may be a previous relationship. So how can you kind of prepare for what that person may bring up, and in your response either gray rocket or to have a very similar to gray rocket, the response that you feel comfortable with or safe with. Don't take the bait. This is something that's very, very hard that I did not know that I was doing in my own life until I was 24. And folks who are toxic or abusive know what they can do to pull you back in. So the hard part is thinking, what does this person do that keeps me back in? Is it that this person gives me money or compliments or certain things? What do they say that somehow makes me feel like it all goes away, and then now I'm caught back into this trap? So one is for a piece is, what is that bait? Knowing that bait, preparing to get that bait from somewhere else if you have to. And then recognizing and not taking that bait from that person. Very difficult, very hard, but can be powerful and life-changing once you recognize what it is and take your power back. Don't talk about the past. Again, can be very difficult around holidays. But knowing about sometimes these past behaviors and past conversations may bring up other pieces. How can I prepare for that? What can I do to adjust? Knowing when you're vulnerable and adjusting accordingly. So if you're knowing you're going to go back home, and you know that you may hear a decision about a grad program you apply to, or about something that you were doing, knowing that there may be a situation where you may be hurt or more vulnerable than usual, having a plan in place to take care of yourself and up that level of self-love and compassion when that happens, so that this person who was waiting for you to be weak does not take that opportunity. And then when all else fails, bailing. Getting out, having your escape route, having your place to go to, having your folks that I need to physically remove myself from this situation. I won't have time to go too deeply because I'm going to get to the other pieces, but having some reflection points or prepping for trigger points, knowing where there's spots where that person can take you back to the pain. What are your grounding techniques? What are the topics that your family may love to talk about, and how can you derail those and gray rock them? And then again, what brings you joy? What makes you feel like this trauma doesn't exist? If that works for you. Finding your community. Some really great tips. Number one, having some on-call friends or having some on-call folks that have consented to be your person. I had a friend who was in a very similar abuse situation to mine, and we said, you know what, like, we're going to be each other's person. If you can't respond to me, can you just tap react on our messages and know that you acknowledged it, and that works for us. So that's my person. We check in with each other, and we are each other's trauma responses. So see if you can have those folks in your lives that can be the people to receive when you need something, or to be someone who's like, I need help to calm back down. And pre-selecting those people while you're in a sober and healthy mind. Don't underestimate the power of Reddit. Reddit is a powerful resource, and there are so many different subthreads of folks who are going to similar situations. And I put some threads, some subthreads that I thought would be helpful to you all. So one is being raised by narcissists. Number two, just no family. Number three, entitled parents. Abuse interrupted or abuse survivors. These are just a couple of popular Reddit threads with thousands of users that have tips and really great moderators to make sure that there aren't abusers within the community, but they're very helpful to have folks who can you can talk to. I have found in my life, I feel like I'm complaining to the same folks over and over, and I don't want to do that anymore. You can have a community of folks who know that you need to get this out of your system. Facebook groups. Who would have thought Facebook would be useful? There are actual Facebook groups for folks who are surviving certain types of trauma that can be helpful. So please recognize and utilize those. And also Instagram hashtags. Using your newly created Finsta, how can you use certain hashtags to see what other folks are doing to recover from these certain pieces? Some other really great resources from Dr. Lapera. Healthy boundaries around holidays may sound like on the left, I'm going upstairs, I'm going to get some quiet time. A space boundary. Let's not discuss this, a topic boundary. We won't be able to stay the night, but we're able to look forward to dinner, so a time at early, or I can't stay here tonight, I'm with a friend, you have this much time with me. I'm not eating this right now, but I appreciate taking the time to make it. Consumption boundaries. We know that going home may also be really triggering to folks who are recovering from disordered eating, and their family may push things in their face and say, you know what, actually I'm not in the mood for pie. I don't want that right now. And being able to put that boundary back for yourself. Holiday time with your family does not require you to engage in conversations that are triggering or draining. It does not require you to deny your reality, nor to confirm a reality that a parent has that you don't share, nor to abandon yourself, your needs, and your boundaries, or to be a past version of yourself. I think this is so important because our family sometimes, I have felt this way, that they kind of snapshot me at a certain age or a certain thing and then treat me like that snapshot, even though I've grown, and I'm not going to be that snapshot just to make you feel better. Like, no, bitch. Sorry, I made you comfortable. So self-compassion is absolutely key. Toxic families push us behind where we should be in our self-love and emotional development, so that catching up really means overindulging in self-love. It feels uncomfortable, it feels selfish, and it may feel gross, but it is absolutely necessary. We're underdeveloped in our pathways for joy. So joy may feel uncomfortable when you've been surrounded by toxicity. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. So I put some examples here of some coping safety plan journaling for you all. So one, a thing to help while you're in a sober mind before you go back home, engage the senses. To feel safe, I need to hear this, smell this, see this, taste this, feel this. Some self-exploration questions. Who am I outside of my family? Who have I always dreamed of being? How can I make this a reality? What brings me joy? Why? And another big question, that what do I like about myself that doesn't involve work or service for other people? Social media. What are my go-to memes for immediate laughter? Or what accounts are able to capture my emotions and remove a layer from guilt? So that might be helpful that I would go ahead and put my responses to folks. So these are me. To feel safe, I need to hear the Steven Universe soundtrack, the Steven Universe movie soundtrack. That is my shit. I love that soundtrack. I love that movie. It makes me feel good. It captures my emotions. It is my happy place, and that's okay. So that's something that I need to hear for myself to feel safe. To smell tea tree and lavender essential oils mixed together. Wow, that calms everything down for me. I get frequent migraines and headaches, so I'm really intentional with the smells that I have, and those are my happy smells. What do I need to see? School supplies, and not new ones, but the ones that I already have, and organizing them, or my books. What do I need to taste? Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper makes me feel good, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it works for me, or sweet things. And what do I need to feel better? I like the feeling of plush, and I love a good orgasm. Those are my things. So what are the things for you all? For self-exploration, who am I outside of my family? I'm intelligent, I'm caring, and I'm fucking fun. Who have I always dreamed of being? I want to be a worthwhile academic. Hot take, I don't think every academic out there is necessary, but I want to be one who is. What brings me joy? Having fun, guilt-free. And that I have the control to remove that layer of guilt. I have the control to have fun and to enjoy it. And what do I like about myself? I get shit done, tenacious, and I'm willing to protect myself. And it feels really, really good to be in a spot where to know where I once was and to grow from that. I love it, and it makes me proud of myself. My favorite meme is here. Oh, it's so funny. Just get to look at it if you get the slides. And what accounts am I able to capture my emotions and remove guilt? Holistic psychologist, love her. The fat sex therapist, love them. Post incredible. And then there's a narcissist apocalypse. It is a podcast and a social media and an Instagram that I found that has just some really great content that makes me feel valid, that doesn't make me feel guilty for what I'm feeling. So, for the folks who were not survivors of toxic families, and you're like, I need some help, this is how to avoid being a head ass and saying really triggering things to other folks because you may have limited framework of family. So, the impact of your words regardless of your intent. Saying things like, your family loves you, not helpful. Love doesn't hurt, and even if they do love me, their actions are contradictory. Rude statement number 1. Rude statement number 2, but it's your family. Yes, that's why it hurts so much. It can't be that bad. It is that bad. What makes you think that my family isn't capable of toxicity or pain? Why would you say that? What empirical evidence do you have to show me that these people are good people? And number 4, just stay on campus. Who's paying for that? Or you may have other family to see, siblings, elderly folks. So please avoid saying things in the left column because they're very triggering to folks who have to go back to situations that they don't want to. and they don't need your reckless ass statements to take them to that point and take them back to that pain, because it also shows that person that you are not someone who's safe to talk to, and you don't want to be that person. So that's what I have for you. I hope that you all have really safe travels as you go back to your homes. If you want to copy the slides, there's my email address. I'm going to also be making a zine to publish about these same content. It's only going to be 8 pages, like in zine format, so it's tiny. But I hope this is helpful. I really want you all to have some strategies if you're going back to a space that you feel like isn't supporting you. But thank you for your time.
Hi, everyone. Okay. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. Thank you, Tracia, so much, and for guiding us through really important but very difficult thought processes that we might be having about our own families or families of people we care about. But I want to open it up to folks if they want to ask clarifying questions or anything you might want. I don't know. It's the Center for Women's Studies. You can ask whatever the fuck you want. I don't know. So sorry.
Hi, I wanted to thank you for your talk, and I also have a question about, you mentioned like very briefly like therapy, and I was wondering like what kind of therapy do you do, and like how do you think it's best come to like help you talk through your pain?
Thank you for that question. I love therapy. So something that I did, I found a therapist who specifically worked with trauma. So I am unashamed. So I use the Help Restore Hope Resource Center that we show in Haven quite often. So community agencies are really, really great because they have folks that are trained to deal with trauma issues. So I look for therapists that are focused on dealing with pain, because I have had friends who have had therapists that didn't have the range to understand what they were going through, and then that worked out in therapy. For me, it's been really helpful because my therapist, Patty Cake, her name is Patty, but I call her Patty Cakes. Love her more than anything. She is so helpful because she's helped me, number one, learn how to trust myself. Number two, how to label behaviors. Number three, to not make abstract meaning out of things, which I had a really big problem with. I tried to think, why does this person treat me that way? And I would try to start like guessing, like they're treating this way because they're this, and that. And that really wasn't productive. And that wasn't helpful to understand the reasons why. It was more important about how it impacted me. So it really helped me combat some of those like negative thinking behaviors, to build trust in myself, to validate what I'm feeling. I also have a person that I can tell anything to that's confidential. I can complain to this person about anything, about whoever in my life, and that is my champion. And I also, for me, knowing myself, my therapist calls me on my bullshit ASAP. She's very, very blunt, and that's something that I like and that I need, because I know that like being an undergrad psych major, I'm like, I know a couple of things. No, you don't. You think you do, but you don't. So it was really helpful to have someone who was direct. So I think for me, my first therapy session with her, I said, this is what I'm struggling with. I know X, Y, Z. This is what I want. And then, is this something that we can do? And she's like, yeah. And I've been in therapy since like February, and with her specifically, and I've loved it. So I would start with a group, either an agency and community that is like Help Restore Hope, or a certain space that is there to help people. You can always call an agency, a mental health association, or someone, and say, who do you have on staff that specializes in parental neglect or this, and that, and kind of do some shopping for that person. But don't think that you have to accept someone just because they're there. Like, allow yourself to do the research, and getting someone that is actually going to support you and be someone that you can vibe with. That hopefully answers your question.
Trisha's practicing her academic waiting for when
I
she
am.
eventually teaches a course, and everyone just looks. So I recognize that this topic is very difficult for folks to talk about, and especially to start asking questions. Would you be willing to talk to people afterwards?
Yeah, okay, sure. And as I mentioned, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who's talking from my own experience. But if you want the slides and want someone to talk to validate, that's what I can do. But I can't I cannot legally.
Trisha's not
give
your
a
therapist also. Trisha's not your therapist.
But just because I know I can't provide the quality of
Right.
service that folks may need, so I just want to make that very, very clear.
But I'll say that unless anyone has any questions, I don't want to pressure folks. That I want to thank again Trisha for taking this time. Thank you all for coming. Please make sure to come back next week for our last brown bag of the semester. I hope you all enjoyed your break. I hope the classes are going well. You're gonna do it. It's gonna be fine. I promise. You'll get the papers done. Absolutely. But thank you again, Trisha, and thank you for coming. Peace out. Probably a little more. And even I was That's so good.
Wrapping longer. It's always it's like that doesn't work for me. Yes. This one it's just like a hide and like 2 blocks on top of something. And it was wow. Look at that. Yes, this is the These brownies are my favorite. Right. I love these brownies forever.
Second year. I'm just like waiting for the God's here. I see him after I got off because they're taking
I want to do like a Facebook call. I'll call it in, yeah. It's just a cup and juice or whatever. Like, let's get this shit figured out. Someone get a picture of me with a sign.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let me.
It's cold as hell. I really want to like show. Can you do that? Yeah, scale like a see the combo pin?
I love it.
I'll be back. I'm trying to catalog all these things.
Thank you so much. And also, thank you for being so honest.
Hey, yeah, it's hard. Honestly, it helps.
It really does help. Thank you so much.
Let me get a picture. Yeah.
Portrait mode or not on that?